Okay, so my name is Metz, and I'm going to talk to you guys tonight a little bit about how to become a better test taker. So I am currently a senior in college in the nursing program, and I know that taking tests is one of the most stressful times for me and my other nursing students. I know that in high school a lot of people have anxiety about stress, but in college it really starts to get to be one of the hardest points. So I just want to talk to you guys about how you can make yourself more prepared and do well on the exams. So studies show for a university entrance exam that out of 436 students, about 48% of students have test anxiety before their exams. I remember my first exam when I was in the nursing program, and I got my grade back and I had one of the lowest grades in the class. And the teacher made me stay afterwards, and she talked to me and she's like, hey, you know, you guys had the lowest grades, like let's talk about what's going on. And I remember sitting there and I'm like, I'm already struggling right now with this first exam. How am I going to make it through this program and how am I going to stay in here? And I really had to change my attitude and go through and figure out what I was going to do to make myself a better test taker. So we're going to talk about 3 things that you can do during tests. And one of them is to take questions literally, move on if you don't know the answer, and then we're going to talk a little bit about changing answers. There's a lot of debate about if you should change the answers when you go back or if you should keep them the same and go with your gut instinct. So the first thing we're going to talk about is taking questions literally. When I got my first test back and we went through the questions, I noticed that a lot of the questions, I was making up things about the questions that really weren't there written out. So if there was a question, say, about a lady who fell and broke her hip, it would say, you know, somebody fell and broke their hip and they're in the hospital. What are you going to do for this? And I'd be sitting there saying, well, how did she fall? How did she do this? What were the elements? What was it like outside? But the reality is when you're taking a test, those things don't matter. In real life, you're going to look at those, but when you're taking a test, you have to really look at what's going on there and only focus on what they're asking you. So I started to highlight the main points and cross off information that didn't matter. And then I realized that I can't create these multiple scenarios in my head. I really have to focus on the key points of what they're asking. And then I had to stop myself from asking those what-if questions. I can't say, well, what if the lady had a stepbrother-in-law that was over there and he was doing this? Like, that's not relevant to what's going on. You really have to focus on what you're looking at, or else you're going to get distracted and you're more prone to pick those wrong answers. So the next thing we're going to talk about is moving on. Staring at a question for 10 minutes thinking that the answer is going to magically pop in your head is just not realistic. All you're going to do when you sit there is just panic yourself. So I've gotten to a test before, and the very first question I'm like, I have no idea what the answer is. Is this how my whole test is going to be? And I stress myself out for no reason. The reality is, don't stare at the question, move on, and go back to it. If you don't know what it is, sometimes you can look later in the test, and there might be questions that help you answer that, and you might be more prone to figuring it out. Staring at it, like I said, isn't going to do anything for you. Don't panic when you're staring at a question that you don't know. Test anxiety, like we talked about before, affects performance more than anything. So if you're stressing yourself out, it's really not going to help you. Another thing is just to skip it. You can go back later on and look at what you're missing, but if you're going to stare at it for too long, it's not going to help you, and you're going to run out of time, and you don't want to be crunched on time by the end trying to rush and think about the other questions when you could have just skipped that question and gone back at the end. And the last thing about moving on from questions is that know what you know and know what you don't know. Like I said, you know what you know going in there, but if you stare at a question, it's not just going to magically pop in your head. You have to just focus on the information that you have and realize that you're not going to retain every single thing that you looked at when you were studying. The last thing I'm going to talk about is changing answers. So in a study, there was 55% of answers that were changed from the wrong answer to the right answer. So their data basically concluded that it is okay when you go back to really look at the question and change it. In my experience, I think this is different for everybody. Some people can go back and change their answers and be successful, and some people go back and change their answers and they're not. I am one of the people who's not. I go back through, and if I change my answer, 99% of the time I'm changing it to the wrong one. So you really have to figure out what's right for you. Go in and talk to your teacher and say, hey, did I get this question right? Did I get it wrong? And look and see if you're changing it from the right one to the wrong one. You want to go back and double check to make sure you filled out your Scantron right. You want to go back and see, hey, did I miss a key question there that said everything but this, and you didn't see the but, so you were really confused? You want to trust your reasoning and realize that you know yourself best. You know how you're a test taker. You know the style that works for you. And like I said, if you change it to the right one, maybe you want to go back and you want to change your answers. A couple other points I just want to talk about for test taking. Make sure you get enough sleep. Don't cram. Sometimes you don't want to show up early. If you show up early for an exam and everybody's sitting there talking about it, you're going to stress yourself out more because everybody's panicking and then you're panicking. Eat a good breakfast, and when you're done, you're done. Don't sit there for 10 minutes after the test thinking that you have to stress yourself out because I'm the first one done. There might be other people who are thinking the same thing. So the takeaways from this, take the questions literally, move on, and in my opinion, I think if you're going to change your answer, it's really personalized to what works best for you. If you want to change it, and if you don't, don't. look at the data and see how it works. Thank you. I hate you. Why were you looking at that? That's how you show her something.